to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, you damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them.
So, wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough?
Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly launch a savage, no-holds-barred takedown of Tim Walz that leaves the Minnesota governor politically dazed. With Greg's signature sarcasm and Megyn's surgical precision, they rip through the confusion, chaos, and cringeworthy blunders of Walz's leadership. From flopped policies to empty press performances, nothing escapes their fierce critique. This isn't just a critique, it's a full-on dismantling of mismanagement served with blistering wit. If Walz had any hopes of recovery, this roast just buried them.
You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record. He keeps doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do, and now you appear to be distancing yourself from them.
Greg was already grinning before opening his mouth, a bad sign for anyone about to be roasted. This time, the lucky winner on Greg's political demolition derby was Minnesota's very own Tim Walz, a man so devoted to mediocrity he could make beige wallpaper feel edgy.
Here's, two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people. What kind of bullshit is...
Greg leaned back like a man ready for an Eleusinian buffet of bureaucratic nonsense, reaching for his favorite utensil, sarcasm. Walz wasn't a leader, Greg quipped. He was a full-time bureaucrat, part-time logic dodger, and a hopeful master of confusion. His version of decisive leadership: release a statement, retract it, and blame the media for noticing.
Walz also seemed to doubt the validity of the last election and future ones.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada, that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a core. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women?
Greg leaned back like a man ready for an Eleusinian buffet of bureaucratic nonsense, reaching for his favorite utensil, sarcasm. Walz wasn't a leader, Greg quipped. He was a full-time bureaucrat, part-time logic dodger, and a hopeful master of confusion. His version of decisive leadership: release a statement, retract it, and blame the media for noticing.
Pouring of love for his son and the relationship between a father and son in that moment was overwhelming too. Yes, even among Republicans. But he wants to dodge the responsibility for his lies, and he brings up his son to do it.
Greg couldn't help but play back the greatest hits. Like the time Walz unveiled his economic plan and ended up pitching what sounded like the plot to a Clist disaster flick. Inflation not his fault. Job loss a cosmic mystery. Small businesses vanishing faster than Halloween pop-up stores in November, pure coincidence.
You'll love this. The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramp.
And Tim Walz really did indeed look like the bumbling knucklehead he said he was.
Greg chuckled. Watching Walz manage a crisis was like watching someone juggle flaming chainsaws in a wind tunnel blindfolded. And that wind tunnel, his own administration. He turned dysfunction into performance art. If government failure had a Spotify playlist, Walz's speeches would be on repeat. And don't get Greg started on the lockdown whiplash. 1 week it was follow the science, the next week follow your gut. And then came the pivot Tim back on camera wearing that face people make when they walk into the wrong wedding but still give a toast. Walz mastered the art of saying everything and nothing, dodging real questions while offering answers no one asked. He didn't pivot, he pirouetted like a moose on roller skates. And those slogans pure fluff. Greg joked that his campaign was written by a motivational cat calendar sounding deep until you realized you just applauded a guy who blamed potholes on climate change and food prices on energy vibes.
Exactly right in the dynamic, and you could tell Walz was unsteady on his feet. Here is part of his very first answer. They kicked off the debate by going to him, and the question was basically as follows: Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, blah, blah, blah. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? And here's Tim Walz.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend.
Greg imagined Walz's future memoir leadership in reverse a guide to walking back every decision gracefully. Each chapter a masterclass in evasion, ending with an apology aimed at no one in particular. But the real comedy, Greg said, was that Walz keeps winning elections. Maybe Minnesotans are just really forgiving or too nice to admit they voted for a guy whose leadership style resembles a substitute teacher who forgot the syllabus. That's when Megyn Kelly joined the roast, bringing her signature style: less flamethrower, more scalpel. While Greg joked Megyn dissected, calm, surgical, and brutally accurate, she painted Walz as a man with a resume thinner than a napkin scribble from a panic attack. She started with education, of course she did. Once a teacher, Walz had overseen one of the most chaotic school landscapes in the country. Schools opened, closed, backtracked. Curriculum chaos, parents irate. It was as if his education policy was based on a dartboard of bad ideas.
Hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly, because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and
when parents asked for answers, they got lectures instead. Walz treated parental concern like a virus: contain it, dismiss it, and blame misinformation. Megyn quipped, if engaging with parents is dangerous, Walz must think bedtime stories are acts of rebellion. Then came the riots. A real test of leadership, and Walz auditioned for the part of the invisible man. Megyn pointed out that while Minneapolis burned, Walz stood behind a podium mumbling half-sentences before disappearing like a magician who lost the instruction manual. The National Guard didn't show up late because they were slow, but because Tim was busy checking Twitter for approval ratings. God forbid, Megyn said, he do the right thing before polling his fan base. The city wasn't the only thing on fire, credibility was too. Walz had this uncanny gift for appearing calm while quietly being the guy who forgot to board the windows. His passive leadership should be framed in a museum with a sign, "Caution may trigger confusion and economic decline."
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about...
Megyn pivoted to COVID, not just the lockdowns, but the bizarre inconsistencies. Salons, health hazards. Protests, civic duty. It was logic by roulette wheel. She said that under Walz, barbershops were biohazards, but jam-packed rallies were democracy. In action, if logic were money, his administration was bankrupt. She laid it out. Tim Walz wasn't leading, he was performing. Spinning the wheel, announcing mandates like a game show host hoping for applause. But leadership isn't about chasing trends. It's about making calls. And Tim treated tough decisions like hot potatoes, toss them, blame the heat, and hope someone else catches the burn. Megyn wasn't done. She tackled his economic blunders. Small businesses took the hit while big box stores thrived. It wasn't a crisis, it was a rigged game. And Walz was the smiling dealer acting shocked at the house. Always winning.
With Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird that for a terrified Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad?
Greg jumped back and taking aim at Walz's obsession with optics. The governor seemed to think smiling hard enough would cover the wreckage behind him. Greg joked his social media team worked harder than his policy advisors. Every photo filtered, every tweet polished like hashtags could fix potholes. Greg laughed, imagining Walz in a war room arguing over camera angles for a speech he forgot the topic of. It wasn't leadership, it was stagecraft. Greg said if Walz had captained the Titanic, he'd host a press conference about the iceberg's tone while tweeting about hope, unity, and ice equity.
But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter.
4 fundamentals and 2 confusing, saying Israel when you meant Iran. Not ideal. May I remind you of Donald Trump's first tweet when she chose him? Thank you. That was just... I mean, he did seem unsteady. And that's the thing, because one of the goals when you get out there, Camille, is to try to project, don't worry, if anything happens at the top, I can do this job. And at no point last night did...
The roast kept sizzling. Greg leaned in like a cat chasing a laser pointer and pounced on Walz's climate agenda. Environmentalism is noble, Greg admitted, but in Walz's hands it looked like a Pinterest board gone rogue. Solar panels on crumbling. School roofs, electric buses breaking down more than his explanations, and bike lanes winding through neighborhoods where no one owned bikes. Greg quipped that Walz was trying to turn Minnesota into a Scandinavian utopia just without the functioning government. And then came the crown jewel, the No Mao May lawn plan. Greg nearly fell out of his chair laughing. Somewhere in a think, tank clipboard warriors decided skipping yard work would save the planet. Minnesotans looked at their jungles of weeds, wondering if overgrowth qualified for tax deductions.
The idea that you said that you were in war.
Yeah.
Did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took her.
Megyn picked it up from there, targeting Walz's obsession with surveys and commissions. Every issue birthed another task force, another group of experts sitting around doing absolutely nothing. Governance by groupthink. Walz, she said, loved consensus, because it gave him cover to avoid responsibility. Why take a real stand when you can blame the committee later? Meanwhile, crime crept up and Tim kept workshopping slogans. Instead of confronting hard truths or backing law enforcement clearly, Walz did political yoga bending into any position that didn't offend the base. Megyn called it spineless ambition, and she meant every word. Greg nodded, reminding viewers. that Walz's entire legacy could be summed up as extended confusion dressed up in a feel-good press release.